But it's lovely to be here. Let's just pray. Father God, now as we just thank you for this beautiful worship time. Thank you that we can come into your presence, Lord. And Father, now I pray as we open your word that you will bless this time, that we will see what you want us to see, Lord. And Father, thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. There's a text in Matthew chapter 15. Jesus is talking to a group of people. And he actually calls it, in Matthew chapter 15 and verse 10. Matthew 15 and verse 10, it actually says, Jesus called the crowd to him and says to this, listen and understand. What goes into your mouth does not defile you, but one comes out of your mouth. That is what defiles you. There's some versions that say what comes out of you or goes into your mouth makes you unclean, or the same sort of area. And Jesus is talking to a Jewish population. He's talking to the priests and the Pharisees and those people there, but even just the common people. Okay, people who would just go to the synagogue every week and every Sabbath. And for them, food was very important. Food was very important and there was this idea of clean and unclean. Remember, as the children of Israel were coming out of Egypt, they were slaves. They had been slaves for 4 or 5 generations. They didn't know anything else but being slaves. They didn't know how to be godly people. They didn't know how to follow and worship God. And so God gave them the 10 Commandments, and he also gave them principles of diet and food and these sort of things, bringing them back to what God created us to be. And here we have this idea of clean and unclean. That's why the prodigal son is so relevant, because it gets so bad for the prodigal son. The situation gets so bad that he actually eats the food that goes to the pigs. And what we know about pigs is, for a Jewish person, they were unclean. Okay, and why? Well, pigs are creation's garbage bins. They eat everything and anything. And so but Jesus is saying something, listen and understand, what goes into your mouth does not defile you, but what comes out of your mouth does. Now, I'm going to say right here, right now, God is not talking about the health message. Jesus was not talking about the health message here. Okay? So this doesn't give you right to go out and just eat whatever you want. Okay? Because, well, you can, but you will suffer. Okay? What goes into your mouth gets taken by your body. I am living proof of that you put the wrong sort of foods in your mouth for long enough, your body suffers. And I've been trying to get healthy. That's a crazy thing. The last probably 12, 18 months I've been trying to get healthy, and I've lost weight, and I was exercising, I was feeling good. I was watching what goes into my mouth. And then I got sick. So I'm not doing anything. No, I'm joking. But I was actually feeling really, really good. And we know that we are all connected. Our body, our mind, our spirit. When one of them's sick, all of them are sick. How do you feel mentally in your head when you're sick with the flu? I feel horrible. Okay, it's not just the flu, then it becomes a mental. And I have to push myself, push into God, make sure things are right, make sure good things come into my body at that time. But Jesus is not talking about this. Jesus is talking about the hypocrisy, okay, of the Pharisees. He's talking about them that you focus so much on food, what goes into your mouth, but you don't care what goes out of your mouth. You focus so much on paying tithe and all these sort of things, but you still treat people like garbage. In fact, it goes down where Peter said, explain the parable to us. And Jesus says, do you still not get it? Are you still not dull? Don't you see that whatever enters the mouth goes into the stomach and then out of the body? But the things that come out of your mouth come from the heart. Whatever comes out of your mouth comes from the heart. And then these things defile us. Really interesting. I've got a doctor here, so I've got to be careful. Make sure my facts are correct. But no, the heart fascinates me. Ever since it was about, how long have we been doing heart transplants? You know, it's about 20 years, I think, 25 years. No, a long time anyway. We've been doing it a long time. And all of a sudden, they thought that the heart was just a muscle. Just like our biceps or our quads or, just a muscle that just pumped blood through our system. And they thought, well, if I get a heart from one person and put it into another, then it's just a muscle, like a muscle transplant. But then some funny things started to happen to people who got heart transplants. There's a recorded story of a truck driver who had a heart transplant, and he got a hand transplant. He didn't know who it was from, but as soon as he woke up, he had this insatiable urge to knit. He's a truck driver who has never knitted in his life, but he had this insatiable urge to just knit. Not only did he have an insatiable urge to do it, but he actually could do it. They gave him the needles and the wool, and he was actually able to knit pearl and I don't know what it is, but anyway. He could actually knit. And they went, this is what is going on here, and they found out that the lady who'd given him the heart had been knitting since she was 6 years old with her grandmother and just loved to knit. And there's all these different things, like people who will wake up and they'll have cravings for food that they've hated all their life, but all of a sudden now they love. And they're going, well, there's a connection here. There's a connection from this organ. It's not just a muscle. Then researchers did some research, and they found out that you can actually tell your mood from your heartbeats. So when you're in a good mood, I should have everyone on an ECG machine or something like that. I can tell you if you're in a good mood or not, or if you're falling asleep. No. And you can actually tell your mood from your heartbeat. So your heart could tell you whether you're happy or sad. And so all these things, and then researchers took it the next step, and they saw how connected we are. We are actually connected, and they measured their heartbeats, and they could see the different. That's the low beep on the heart that actually measures the mood. And if you are sad, it can actually transfer without you saying a word. It can actually transfer to, say, me. And we know that, don't we? You can be happy, you can be, and someone walks in the room and all of a sudden either goes one way or another. And so what Jesus is saying here is, hey, don't focus so much on what goes in your mouth. Be healthy. Our health message is something that's so important, and it's something that we should be preaching, but it comes from relationship. It should be about the heart. You don't need to look at what food you're eating. You need to look at the heart. I heard a really interesting talk just recently. It was from a gentleman who has spent his life working with people in addiction. And he talks about the whole idea of the higher power. You know, he's a Christian. He's helped thousands and thousands of people to overcome addictions, whether it be alcohol or drugs or sex or whatever. And he talks about this whole idea of the higher power. Because, you know, in AA, in most addiction support groups now, there's this idea that I can't do it. I can't do it by myself. Self got me into this trouble. I need to go to a higher power. I need to give it to a higher power. And he talks about this idea of connection. Okay, being connected to that higher power. He also talks about the idea that when we're looking at addiction, when we're looking at something in our life that we want to change, okay, it is important not to focus on that thing that we want to change. Okay? So if I want to eat better, we'll go back to eating. If I want to eat better, it's important that I don't focus on the bad foods that I eat, but I focus on the positive, on the good things. Okay? And he gives the example of a baseball. There was the World Series. It was Game 7. It was a really important game in baseball, and it came down to the last strike. And the coach came out to the pitcher, and he says, "Do not throw a curveball. Do not throw a curveball." And the pitcher goes, "Yeah, no problem. Okay, no worries, coach. I won't throw a curveball." He goes, "No, don't you? I'm telling you, don't you dare throw a curveball." Pitcher goes, "Yeah, okay, I heard you." He goes, No, listen to me. You throw a curveball, you will be sacked, and I will make sure you never play baseball for any team ever again. Don't you dare." He goes, "All right." He goes, No, don't you listen to me. Don't you dare throw a curveball. And the pitcher's freaking out now, thinking that the coach has lost it. And he's going, okay. And so the batsman comes up, it's 2 strikes out, but this batter is ready to swing. He needs a home run to win. They need to get him out. He's thinking, I can't throw a curveball. Whatever I do, I can't throw a curveball. And he gets up, he winds up, and he pitches, and he throws a curveball. And he pitched the guy out. The coach knew that how much he suggested that came into his mind, it came into him, he was going to do it, no matter what he was thinking. And so many times in our life, we think, I can't get angry, or I can't be this, or I can't do this. And we focus on that bad thing. We focus on that negative thought, so much so that it just becomes part of who we are. Where God is saying, no. Don't focus about what goes in. Focus about what comes out. In other words, you've got a problem. It's a heart problem. You've got a problem with anger. You've got a heart problem. If you've got a problem with patience, it's a heart problem. If you've got a problem in your relationship, it's a heart problem. I took a wedding just recently, and I was talking to the couple, and it was in my sermon, and I said, look, we talked about 1 Corinthians 13 because it was a wedding, and every wedding has to have 1 Corinthians 13. And I said to them, guys, look at patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control, all these things. I said, look at them. They're important. And if you're struggling with patience for your partner, don't work on the patience, work on loving. Because if I'm struggling with patience, I've got to be more patient, or I've got to be more, kind. It's not that thing that's the problem. The problem is the love. You need to love that person more. The problem is your heart. And you see, that's a really telling thing. Because there are some things that I will never do. Okay? I can't build like Peter. Okay? You could train me, but I still wouldn't be able to do it. In fact, but if you came and you said, all right, we're going to knock down this church, and Wazza, I'm going to give you all the machinery, I'm going to give you all the equipment, I'm going to give you all the resources. I'm not saying that this is what we've got a board meeting tomorrow, but I'm not suggesting that. Okay? Don't worry. But I'm saying, I'm going to give you everything you need to rebuild this church. I'm still going to go, I can't do it. Because I don't know how. I don't have. No matter what tools or machinery or anything he gave me, I'm still not going to be able to build a church. So many times we go, you know what? You need to quit this before you come to Jesus. Or you need to get this right in your life before you come to Jesus. And you're going, I can't. No, I don't know how to do that. And it's crazy because Jesus is saying, no, come to me. Lay your burdens upon me and I will give you rest. In John chapter 15, one of my favourite verses, favourite stories in the book, in the Bible. In John chapter 15, it starts off verse 1. There, I can imagine, this is after the Passover feast, I can imagine they're walking off their meal and they're walking off the lamb where they've just experienced, and Jesus, can just take a moment to imagine this, okay? As they've partook in that Passover lamb, Jesus is thinking to himself, that's a symbol of me. That's a symbol of what I am going to do. And then he shared that with his disciples, where he broke the bread and took the wine and he said, this is my body, this is my blood. Because what I'm going to do, you're going to share in and share with the rest of the world. But as they're walking away from this time, Jesus says, I am the vine and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit. When I grew up in Currumbong. I got out, so it's okay. But I grew up in Currumbong, and next to our house, we shared this a fence line with Bob next door. Beautiful man. And he, on this fence line, it was a wire fence, like chicken wire, and on this fence was growing these grapes. Now, I used to love this because as soon as those grapes became ripe, I was into them straight off the vine. And I used to love this grape. But I remember when I was about 4 or 5, and I've come out and I was walking down the side of the house, and there is Bob, and he's cutting this vine. He's cutting off all the leaves and he's cutting off the branches. And I'm going, dude, no, what are you doing, Bob? What are you doing, Uncle Bob? He goes, I'm pruning the vine. I said, no, don't do that. I want grapes. As soon as spring comes and as I want these grapes to, because I used to love these grapes. And he goes, no, the grapes will be there. This is important. He says, I've got to prune away these old branches and these branches that are dying so the vine doesn't waste its energy and it can put its energy in to the fruit. And I remembered that. I don't remember anything else when I was 4, but I remember that. And I'm looking at this verse and I'm going, okay, Jesus is saying, here's the vine and the Father is the gardener. And he's talking about taking things away from the vine that don't bear fruit. And so what a vineyard does is they take the vine and any branches that are not bearing fruit, if they die, he cuts them off. But if they're sick, quite often what they'll do is they'll lift the branch up so it gets sunlight, so it gets more water. So the leaves can see the sun and get the energy photosynthesis. But the vine is connected through the rootstock. If the rootstock of the vine is sick, the whole vine is sick. And so what a vineyard will do then is he will take that vine that is sick, he'll take it from the sick rootstock and he'll graft it. He'll graft it into a good rootstock. And what he'll do is he'll cut part of that branch or that vine and he'll cut part of the rootstock and embed it in there so it grafts to become one plant. So the energy and the nutrients that come from the roots and the life that comes from the roots comes through the new rootstock. And this is why Jesus is saying, remain, verse 4, remain in me. That word there is also the word we get for graft. Be grafted into me. Become one into me. Remain in me as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain or be grafted into me. I am the vine and we are the branches. If you remain or be grafted in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. There is nothing more beautiful than seeing a vineyard when it's in full fruit. When you're seeing those big clumps of grapes. Or my friends have a pistachio farm down in South Australia. And you know, pistachios they're siblings to grapes. And they you can see the pistachios, they're on like a bunch, like grapes. They look exactly the same. And when you see them in full fruit, you see the fruit, you go, that tree is doing what it was created to do. But then you might come to a sick tree, or you might come to a sick vine. And so the vineyard will look at either making sure that there's more fertiliser or more water that gets to that vine, become more healthy. Or, again, they will take it and they will graft it into better rootstock where it needs to be. Sometimes Jesus says this, but church, remember the fruit that God requires for us. What is the fruit? What is the fruit? Well, that's Paul. Paul actually uses this terminology in Galatians. Galatians chapter 5. He uses this same terminology as Jesus did. And he talks about the fruit of evilness, but then he talks about the fruit of the Spirit. Okay? It's not Wazza's fruit. It's not your fruit. It's not grapes. It's not pistachios. It's not oranges. But it's the fruit of the Spirit. Remember? It comes from being grafted into Jesus. It doesn't come from myself. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Those belong to Christ Jesus. They've been crucified from the sinful nature and its passions and desires. In other words, when we are grafted into Jesus, we are going to exhibit this fruit in our life. We're going to exhibit love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. If I'm struggling with one of those things, I don't look at that thing that I'm struggling. If I'm struggling with self-control, I don't go, I need to have more self-control. I look to Jesus. I push in and get closer and graft into Jesus. If I'm struggling with patience or love, I don't look at that thing. I look towards Jesus, being grafted and connected in with Jesus. Because when I'm grafted into Jesus, his passions, His love grows through me. I no longer focus on what Wazza needs. I now focus on what Jesus needs, what Jesus wants. So if I'm struggling to do morning Bible study, I don't focus on making sure and getting up and I've got to get up and I've got to do more Bible study. I focus on I want to get closer to Jesus. And so when that alarm goes off, I want to get up and do that Bible study. Because you see, Jesus doesn't want slaves. He says to the disciples, you were called servants, now I call you friends. Because when we're connected, when we're grafted into Jesus, we move from that I have to I want to. We move into that I need to focus on I don't focus on the negative things in my life. I want to focus on the positive things of Jesus. And when we get grafted into that God-shaped heart, God's heart becomes ours. We're no longer unclean by what comes out of our mouth, by what comes out of our thoughts. We are made clean because of Jesus, because we're grafted into him. But how can we do that, church? How can we be grafted into Jesus if we do it one day a week? It's like so many of us take that grafting, and I'll be grafted into you, Jesus, today. But as soon as the sun goes down, I'll step away. Once you get grafted into that rootstock, you are there, you are stuck. That energy source, you are connected. It comes in and it becomes part of your life. It becomes part of who you are. It becomes more than one day a week. It becomes 7 days a week. This is why Paul talks about, I die daily to the cross. The problem with the living sacrifice is that we get off the altar. We need to be dying daily, minutely, secondly, to being connected in with Jesus. And when that happens, we see the world as Jesus sees it. Not separate, not disconnected, but connected. Seeing people with hurts and pains and addictions and people suffering from abuse, and not judging them, but accepting them and loving them. Saying, Jesus connected me. I want you to be connected to Jesus. So what do we do, church? Where do we go from here? My challenge is that this week, that you will look to be grafted into Jesus. That you'll look to be connected in to Jesus in every day, and just see what happens, what changes happen in your life. I think we're going to sing our last song.